Hello and welcome to the Gravel Ride podcast. I'm your host, Craig Dalton. This podcast is supported by patrons like you. Just visit www.buymeacoffee.com/thegravelride to register your support and offer any financial contributions you're able to. And as always, if you're unable to support the podcast financially, ratings and reviews are hugely appreciated. So take a moment and offer us a review. It really helps with our discoverability. This week on the podcast, I've got part 2 of my interview with Gregor von Medeazza. If you haven't listened to it already, hit stop right now and go back one episode in your feed and look for part 1 with Gregor. Gregor is a rider based in Namibia who recounts his ride at the Munga in South Africa, a race dubbed the world's toughest race. Gregor's got a lot of interesting stories about this 1,000-kilometer race and his motivation to complete the event on behalf of a charity called Bicycle Empowerment Network Namibia. I'll put a link to that charity in the show notes so you can consider a contribution. It's a very worthy cause, and I think you'll love it when you hear Gregor's explanation of the impact it's having throughout Namibia. So with all that said, let's dive right into part 2 with Gregor talking about the Munga. Now that you've stepped up to the Munga and it's 1,000+ kilometers, how many days are out there? How many days were you out there? And I'm assuming at this level of distance, you needed to sleep. And can you just talk about what your days were like out there?
Yeah, so the days and the nights become all a big mess at one point. But so I had kind of a mental objective to finish around 4 days, and actually that's what ended up happening. So I finished in about 90 hours, so that was just a few hours short of 4 days. And I was riding, of course, it's a solo race, but you still obviously allowed to kind of ride in groups as long as you don't draft. In fact, you can draft. The race rules say that you can draft for the first 200 kilometers or so until the first race village. And then after that, you can still ride in with buddies or whatever, but you can't draft. So you have to keep some distance between yourselves or cycle next to each other. And so I ended up cycling the better part of the race, 800 kilometers, with a made in Namibia tough nut, Henk Hoer, who's a good friend of mine, way more experienced than I am, way faster, I should say, than I am as well, and who doesn't need as much sleep. But so he was really the pace setter, and it was actually super fun and fantastic to be able to ride with him for the better part of it. We had a lot of fun together. Met a lot of other people on the way, and his objective was really not to sleep until for the first, actually more than the first half of the race, which I wasn't sure how my body would react to that. So what we ended up doing is we started at noon on the 2nd of December, rode through the entire afternoon, through the entire first night. Obviously had some race villages there where we could obviously refuel, get some proper food. In all the race villages, there's sleeping facilities, so that's fantastic. But we skipped the first one that we reached in the middle of the first night, as many riders would. You're pumped with adrenaline, Craig, by that time, so you're obviously not up for sleeping at all. Anyway, we just had come out of a 40K section, really rough, that I didn't expect to be that rough, of single track and jeep tracks in the middle of the night. Amazing. So you come out of that and you're completely pumped. So there's no way on earth you're going to sleep there, even if it's the middle of the night. And then we continued another kind of day until midday. There was a second race village, same thing. Didn't feel like sleeping there either. And then we actually carried on. We carried on the entire afternoon of that. And then eventually when we hit 400 kilometers, so that was for the second sunset, 400 kilometers being around 300 miles or so, we faced a lot of headwind. And that was for an hour and a half, 2 hours of riding solid in headwind straight. And there we realized when it was getting dark for the second time that we would have to probably stop at one point and get a little bit of sleep. So that's the first time we then stopped.
And were you carrying sleeping gear?
No, we were not. So this race is officially called a semi-supported race. So meaning that you can really race it. And some people, but not many, I think, do carry minimal bivy equipment. At least I'm aware of one rider who did. But otherwise, you can really go light. So you would probably, what I did have with me in case that's of interest, I had Epidura 14-liter that actually our good friend Dan kindly brought to me to Namibia. So I had that at my back seat under my saddle, just to carry basically some warm clothing because, as you would expect in the desert, scorching hot in the day, so 40 Celsius plus. I'm not sure what it is in Fahrenheit. I guess around 100.
Wow.
During the day, and it goes right down to, I should say, sometimes close to freezing, but not this year. This year was okayish. Apparently, it was quite cold still compared to other years, but you definitely need a number of layers. For us, I think it was 5 or 7 degrees. So yeah, with sleep deprivation and obviously dehydration, whatever. Obviously, you feel the cold a little bit more as well. So you basically carry a few layers of clothing for the night, and then you've got enough ability to carry water. That's super important, of course. So I had actually 4 water bottles with me, nearly 4 liters in total. I didn't carry any camel bag or anything. I didn't want to have anything on my back. That's just a personal choice. So I arranged my bike so that it could basically carry everything on the frame itself. So I had 2 bottles inside the frame and another 2 bottles on either side of my fork, front fork, and then basically just basic pouch, basically for my electronics. I had a dynamo which worked wonders for me. I was very happy to actually have that to recharge my phone and my Wahoo, and then work on the light for the night with a little mini Petzl head torch, which helped a lot as well. So that was a good combination between the head torch and the dynamo. And then just a food pouch at the side of my handlebar, just to carry a little bit of food with me. The biggest stretch that we had without having any refueling ability was about 100K, so probably 70 miles or so in the middle of the day. So if it's during the night, that's not too bad. But middle of the day, you really start to struggle basically and start thinking a lot and planning and calculating with your water.
Yeah, I was going to ask if the cooler evening temperatures made you more efficient and cover more mileage in the evening than in that hot day sun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I would say the night riding was awesome, especially after a luxurious 60 or 70 minutes of sleep. I remember the first time we actually stopped for a nap. That was the second night. We had, I think, respectively 60 and 90 minutes of sleep or so between myself and Henty. And then we hit the road again. And you feel so refreshed. It's unbelievable how the body works. Just having not slept an entire night and then barely sleeping for 60 or 90 minutes in the second night. I remember hitting...
What's that like when the alarm goes off after 60 minutes? Are you just disoriented and confused?
I wanted to punch Henty in the face because he's the one who actually did the good job of setting the alarm and waking me up. Then, but yeah, you kind of, I think you're in this zone of the racing and you're completely pumped, Craig. I mean, I think that's the amazing thing with those ultra endurance events is that you really get into it so quickly, and it's impressive the ability of the body to overcome sleep deprivation and so you are, I would say, after those very short power naps. I mean, wasn't it Napoleon who conquered the entire Europe just on power naps, basically of 15 minutes? so basically, you come out of those and you're completely refreshed. I remember the second night after that power nap at midnight, we hit the road again. And we were cruising. I mean, we were hitting it, and then, of course, there's no secret. I mean, at one point it hits you back because obviously your body is sleep deprived. So you can't cheat your body that long either. But you do actually have tremendous reserves and resources At one point, I have to admit, I wasn't sure anymore if I was actually seeing straight or was hallucinating. I start seeing a lot of, that was on the third night, I think, start seeing scorpions, but, plural, many of them, huge ones, crawling across the tracks, attracted by my light. And I wasn't sure if I was still making sense. But actually, I didn't. I found out later that actually I was seeing straight. I wasn't hallucinating, and there were spiders. They were actually part of a large spider species type. They were not scorpions, but they really looked like them. So yeah, you have your moments where you kind of go like, okay, that's getting a bit dodgy, but apart from that, it was beautiful.
Yeah, I've heard of the existence of sleep monsters from ultra marathon friends and adventure racing friends, where their teammates just sort of start speaking lunacy about what they're seeing.
Well, I mean, on that note, I didn't experience it, but I heard from one rider who came up to me kind of laughing, saying, Greg, what happened to me last night is he basically, there was so much headwind and he was so tired that at one point he felt like he could, half dreaming, half awake, he could kind of lean into the wind. And obviously you can't really lean onto the wind when you're on your bike cycling, right? But somehow he started dreaming that he could, and he actually did, and only to obviously realize that wasn't physically possible when he actually woke up while crashing on the ground, because obviously there was a bit of an issue going on there. So yeah, I mean, the sleep monsters are real. Another guy crashed into a gate simply because I think his head was just falling asleep, and he didn't actually notice the gate was coming up, and he just like went straight into it. So yeah, you hear all sorts of things going on, which I have to admit I was really just only softly experiencing. So I had a fairly good experience with that until, I must admit, the fourth night. That was just too much. So at one point I really had to take a break, and this is where also my good friend Henty, who is a tough nut Namibian, basically just carried on. And I was just like, okay, like I just need to stop, mate. I just need to have a bit of a break. And then this is where, tactically speaking, my race made absolutely no sense, because I actually stopped just 100K, 150K before the finish line. I literally stopped for 8 hours. So I slept 6 hours, didn't put my alarm clock, just went like, yeah, I just need to sleep. That's it. I'm just gonna shut down like a baby, and I did. And then I had a beautiful shower, had 3 plates of lasagna. I just basically really took my time. So from purely racing point of view, that was an absurdity, and I broke all the kind of unspoken rules of the Munga, I guess, by stopping there at the very end. But it was beautiful. The benefit of it is obviously I finished the race strong, fresh, far too strong, far too fresh. I could have carried on for another many miles after that beautiful sleep. But basically, I ended on that Sunday morning, the 6th of December, which in many countries in Northern Europe, in Belgium at least, resonates with Saint Nicholas, which is a beautiful party day for kids. And I basically rolled into the sunrise and to the finish line with a amazing spirit and just fresh legs and fresh mind, and really enjoying it. And I guess maybe blessing in disguise is that finishing in that sense, first of all, with the honorable still, I think, 4-day mark that I had kind of artificially set myself, but also just full of enthusiasm for next races, rather than being, I think, completely disgusted and not wanting to ever see my curve again. So I think that also had a beautiful end and a good advantage to it.
That's an amazing result. You did mention to me that you had a few physical challenges to coincide with the sleep deprivation along the way, and there was maybe an interesting solution that became materialized for you.
So yeah, I'm not sure if we want to go there. These are kind of bad memories, but certainly big lessons learned. So yeah, I never had experienced saddle sores before. I didn't really know what they were, and I had done, obviously, my very modest riding and as an average cyclist, but I had done a couple of, I would say, fair distances in terms of testing my physical perhaps ability, or fine-tuning gear, and kind of testing a little bit the limits, but never had I experienced, I was lucky enough never to have experienced saddle sores, even on the 500K rides or multi-day riding that I had done. So it's completely new to me. 800 kilometers into the ride, all of a sudden, big alarm bells basically start ringing downstairs. And yeah, and I had to come to the realization that this is what saddle sores are. And goodness me, it hurts. So really, I mean, basically my downstairs was on fire. And I didn't really know what to do anymore at that stage. I just realized that from what I had kind of heard from others, and is that once that hits you, it's kind of difficult to treat it as you go. I mean, it's really about prevention. So I had tried everything that I could with, anti-chafing, as I would usually do on longer rides anyway. But then once it hits you, especially because you don't really leave your body to rest, especially the first 3 days. I mean, literally, there was very little rest. Actually, there was only maybe a couple of hours here and there between a few minutes of sleep. As I said, cumulatively, I think I had 3 power naps of 60, 90 minutes, and then another 25 minutes, and then perhaps another 30 minutes or so. That was pretty much all I rested really for the first 3 full days. And then maybe the time when you eat or whatever. But otherwise, you're always in your bibs. And at one point, yeah, I guess it just starts developing. And so once that hits you, I didn't really know what to do anymore. And I was in this place in the middle of the Tankwakaru at that point. It was towards already kind of the last segment of the race, so maybe another 200 miles to go. And I was in pain, Craig, at that point. And so I hit this place, this petrol station and kind of cafe in the middle of nowhere, and held by 2 hippies, beautiful people. Susanna, I will remember her my entire life. Very compassionate Susanna, who basically saw me in pain. She asked me, "So what do you need?" And I said, "Well, if you sell a new pair of bum cheeks, I would love to buy those." But she didn't have bum cheeks to sell. But she said, I can offer you maybe a solution that I've seen many riders struggling with saddle sores, basically going for my remedy. And so she took me behind her counter because she realized I might be a little bit embarrassed about the solution. And she said, "Yeah, so here are sanitary pads for ladies. And actually, if you put those into your Lycra, they probably would work for you."
That's amazing.
So I was like, really? Is that? I mean, I had never heard about that. So maybe that's something that actually is a fairly well-known fact. But of course, all of a sudden it started making sense. I was like, yeah, it makes sense, right? I mean, it's padding. It's obviously hygienic. It's absorbent. So if you have any bleeding, which I don't think I had necessarily, but any wetness, in the middle of the day or whatever, that could potentially work. So basically, I followed her advice. She gave me a big hug. Off I went with my sanitary pads in my Lycra. Obviously not in the middle, but kind of at the sides where the saddle sore are, if you want to know the geometry. And yeah, I tested it out, and I wasn't sure the entire last part of the ride if actually it was working or if it was the soothing compassion of Susanna having taken care of me that actually made it. But it certainly brought me through the finish line, still with a bit of pain. But yeah, so maybe that's something to be patenting.
I apologize for making you revisit that discomfort, but it sounds like even the thought of Susanna's kindness gave you a little bit of a smile today.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and certainly if any of the listeners have, I think, other advices, maybe I would really encourage them to share them, because I think saddle sores is never a fantastic, glamorous topic to talk about. But certainly in my case, I was like, goodness me, if anyone can give me a solution now. So yeah. So I look forward to other stories that other listeners may want to share also on that very glamorous topic.
So the Munga was obviously a huge personal goal of yours, and it sounds like it was known in the cycling community in Namibia, so it's a big feather in your cap. But you were not only motivated by your own personal desires and goals, you were motivated by a particular cycling charity, and I'd love to highlight that a little bit for the listener.
No, thanks, Craig. And indeed, I mean, we spoke a little bit about meaningful, or the meaning in cycling and the purpose that also comes with it. And so I was lucky enough. I mean, in Namibia, I'm very passionate, and I'm working on including on public health issues and child rights issues. And so realizing that community health workers who basically have to, in a country like Namibia especially, have to walk very long distances sometimes to actually reach remote communities and deliver services to the children who need those services most. Basically, a lot of their time is spent because of lack of transport, or inadequate transport, and having to walk long distances. And so what we've experienced in the past is obviously community health workers then being equipped with something as simple as a bicycle actually obviously enables their work quite a bit, and therefore the impact that this has on the well-being of children, and children being able to access more efficiently, fast and more regularly, the important health services that they require. And so obviously the connection was quite instantaneous in terms of the cycling. So I thought, if I already kind of suffer on my saddle for so many hours, I might as well just use that event for a bit of public awareness around the issues pertaining to child rights, but also the struggles, obviously, of accessing public health services, and the many opportunities for children to be better equipped when they actually are able to access public health services. And so, long story short, I basically reached out through a common friend to a guy called Michael Linker, who basically had started an NGO many years ago here in Namibia called the Bicycle Empowerment Network. And basically, this NGO is precisely doing that. It's basically reaching out to the most remote communities, and through cycling, bringing physical activity, physical education to children, to community members, but also for the purpose of transport, reducing transport costs, and in the case for community health workers, as a real tool for them to be able to deliver their services more efficiently. And so everything fell into place quite quickly, in the sense of me then wanting to use the Munga as a fundraising event, and raising public awareness. And it worked really way beyond my initial, or our initial expectations, also with Michael. And so with the support of friends and family members, who I really like to take the opportunity, actually, through your podcast, Craig, to thank them all. There are many of them, and you know who you are. Basically, immediately answered to the call for support. And so through the fundraiser, we've been able to leverage just over 4,000, equivalent of 4,000 euros. And it's really worked wonders. 4,000, sorry, US dollars, I should say. And it worked wonders. So what we're going to do now with this funding is the ability for us now to bring more bikes to the community health workers, but also the Bicycle Empowerment Network has already established a web of hubs that actually maintains those bicycles in the north of the country. Because very often, of course, when a bicycle is given, and there's no ability to then maintain the bicycle, or something as simple as a chain breaks, or even the tire gets a puncture, or whatever you, then of course the risk is that this bicycle will not be used anymore. So the beauty of what we've been linking with is that there's already a system and a whole community of support around bicycle use, basically, for community health workers. So the contribution that we are bringing is really just to strengthen even further the public health system in that part of the country. So it's been a beautiful, meaningful, I think, way for me to connect that ultra endurance, very personal kind of endeavor, and you're in your bubble and you kind of cycle, but at the same time feeling throughout supported by all my friends and family members, and basically able to connect therefore also to the wider meaning of cycling, and having cycling really as a tool for development and for betterment of child rights.
That's absolutely amazing. Is there a way for our listeners to contribute to that NGO at this point?
Absolutely. So what you could probably do, Craig, is to put the NGO's website there. You can also put my contact details. There's the ability to still contribute to the NGO and to the donation fundraiser is still open, of course. And anyone who feels or it resonates with the ability and the willingness to contribute, obviously more than welcome.
Amazing. I will definitely put that in the show notes. Gregor, the conversation has been absolutely a pleasure. I really enjoyed hearing about the Munga and the Desert Dash and everything you've done for the cycling community in Namibia. And yeah, just thanks so much for the time.
Thanks to you, Craig, and thanks to the cycling community for what they've done for me. So fantastic having been on your show, Craig. We'll continue listening avidly to all the tips and conversations that you are able also to bring, and thanks to you really for enriching our passion and the global cycling community, Craig, through your podcast.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So that's it for this week's episode of the Gravel Ride podcast. I appreciated Gregor's time, and I hope you enjoyed listening. This was our first episode with a guest from the continent of Africa, and it was really exciting to learn a little bit more about how gravel is crossing the globe and new events are cropping up all over the place. We've got another great event from Africa, the Migration Gravel event in Kenya, that we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks, so keep tuned for that. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. And if you're interested in talking between episodes, and I certainly hope you are, I encourage you to join the Ridership. It's our new forum for gravel and adventure cyclists. You can visit www.theridership.com for your invite today. Until next time, here's to finding some dirt under your wheels.